そのファッションショー、私が出てもいいわ。
そんな簡単に出られるもんじゃないだろ。
I don't know, they did let these tall amateurs walk down the way in Paris once. And yeah, we'll talk more about this at the end. We opened, ironically, at a clothes store as Sango and her mother were getting ready for a busy day at their shop by chilling all their makeup products by the looks of it. These particular cold foundations were going to be used in an upcoming fashion show hosted by this dude who started eyeing Sango. Actually, he was looking for a replacement model, so hey, why not flex some of those nepotism muscles by using the sponsor's daughter? Anyway, after the opening, wait, hold on, go back. What the hell?
Well, it's about time you showed up.
And you know, since this has been such a long time coming, may as well use 2 clips to describe this.
It's been 84 years.
It legit feels like I've been sitting on that clip for that amount of time.
But yeah, they finally got around to changing the opening, where they still use Mermaid Laura for 90% of it, and are still using the chicken finisher, so yeah, some of my commenters guess they didn't do much of anything with it. So anyway, Sango told her friends about the show, in particular how she had always wanted to be a part of it in spite of her stage fright. Obviously, she did need to take a few crash course lessons to get ready, which she then wisely shared with her friends in order to refine her own stance.
Patrick, breathe!
They also happened to have a few samples for the show, letting them do a little dress rehearsal, and also learn how they needed to really show off the clothes, which for Manatsu meant doing a bunch of random poses, including...
Well, I see someone wants to be a part of Cobra Kai. And yeah, I haven't seen that yet, but I've been meaning to. Okay.
Meanwhile, the Lair of the Witch, as usual, the real big bad of the show, deployed one of his underlings, this week a reluctant Numeri. And I will admit, I got a little chuckle out of Butler letting out a big sigh after realizing that he needed to butter up this lady. It did lead into a bit of an overextended gag of him complimenting the slug while Elda paced back and forth. At the fashion show, it really started to hit Sango that she was a total amateur amongst a whole group of at least semi-pros. This led into her big conflict of the episode, as during a rehearsal run, she tripped and turned into a deer staring into some headlights. Altogether, a fairly well done scene that got across her stage fright. I mean, it certainly was no masterpiece of visual storytelling like last week, but still, good setup for a character who really needs this development.
Sango has been the unfortunate victim of a severe lack of spotlight episodes, which by my count has been 1 and maybe a half.
Specifically episodes 9 and 25, and while the former was pretty good, as it did effectively tie her backstory into the main conflict of that episode, and even managed to tie in the show's themes about makeup better than most other episodes, it was still more of a basis for a character arc rather than any sort of significant progression of such. Thus, 25 really should have followed up on that, as even several scenes from that episode seemed to hint that Sango was going to be the focus, but instead that went more to Sakuragawa and the comedy. And even though Asuka and Minori were also not getting much until their most recent episodes, they at least did get some build up to them, while Sango has gotten...
nothing! It's a real shame because, as I said, Yumi Hanamori is my personal favorite member of this cast, as I think she has the best range. She played Hayasaka for God's sake.
Now, to be fair, there has been some very subtle development for her in episodes like the Minori Bai Switch episode, where during a cheering routine, she was the only one wearing a traditional cheerleader outfit, while the rest of her team were wearing Jotaro jackets. This could be interpreted as either her sticking to traditional cheerwear, or her trying to stick out during a smaller, less consequential event.
Honestly, I didn't even notice this detail at first until someone pointed it out in the comments, and somehow I managed to remember it up until now.
But yeah, obviously this was going to be an event where she was going to stick out a lot more. This was all noticed by Numeri, who was just kind of floating out in the open. I mean, none of our heroines or the show staff noticed the giant floating sea slug because,
The answer is don't think about it!
Thus, it wasn't too surprising when she once again, like at the aquarium, used a clever and subtle attack by mixing a Yaraneda amongst the models.
でもなんだか
Pretty sure this is just what happens at most Victoria's Secret shows these days. But yeah, it worked really well, with the monster even being able to go through a few wardrobe changes. It was able to do all of this because the rest of the show staff were busy with something else that we'll get to in just a minute. But first, we got... God, and I thought my references were outdated. Numeri had her monster pull an all-out attack, and hey, don't get this video demonetized! Anyway, this led into an okay-ish fight. I mean, I think it would have been better if A, this thing put on some clothes, and B, if we didn't cut back and forth between this and another scene. Speaking of which, as I mentioned earlier, the rest of the fashion show, including Sango, were busy in the back because the helium for their balloons never arrived. Well, okay, that sucks, but you probably don't need balloons for a fashion show.
この風船があった方が絶対に可愛い。
Yeah, but I'm also familiar with the term the show must go on, as in usually in a timely manner. But no, everyone, including the models, helped blow up the balloons, even though they really should be getting ready for the actual show. I mean, I get it, this was supposed to be the scene where Sango learned her big lesson of the episode, about how they were all working together towards the same goal of putting together the cutest show possible. It's a good message, don't get me wrong, especially for helping this character develop, but it's just a bunch of balloons. There's a lot of other less frivolous things they could be working on together, like coordinating the dresses, the staging, or, you know, their makeup. I don't know, this just doesn't feel like something deserving of the triumphant BGM. In fact, you could say it's all being overblown. I'll shut myself out. Anyway, eventually Sango heard the fighting going on. It took an unnatural amount of time, but Numeri figured that she'd be no threat because...
さっき転んだの見ちゃったところまで来られるかしらそこのランウェイを
Come on guys, we gotta force this message in as hard as we can! I mean, come on, just because she's not human, why would Numeri assume Sango's stage fright would affect her here, especially when she's egging her on? Now, they could have had so that her stage fright affected her, understandably, a little by having Numeri not say anything, and instead showing through little visual cues Sango tensing up a little before making her big victorious dash to save her friends. That would be a much more effective scene. We know the show is capable of such great visual storytelling, but then again, last week's writer was Isamu Murayama, while this week was, well, we'll save that for the analysis. Anyway, Sango managed to land a good hit on the naked monster before they finished it off with the mammoth stamping finish. And with that, the episode ended with the fashion show proving to be successful, as not only was Sango much more confident about going down the runway, but more importantly, the balloons were flying, even though they were filled with regular air and not helium, and therefore they should have fallen to the ground, but whatever. Now, I usually don't bring up next episode previews, so don't get used to this, but next week is intriguing enough that I do kind of want to bring it up here. A friend of mine told me about an interview with character designer Yukiko Nakatani, where she revealed that next week is going to be an anthology episode with a ton of different animation styles, specifically 10 going by that title. Judging by this preview, the in-story reason for this is because our heroines are going to be exchanging kaidan, or ghost stories, as a part of Hyakumonogatari, a game where they try to tell the scariest story. And apparently, amongst the scary tales are the Heartcatch team. I mean, granted, some of Erika's faces are terrifying, but yeah, it's also going to be an obvious tie-in for the upcoming film. It's a good idea to help build interest for the film, as even Healing Good was going to get an episode with the Yes team before their crossover last year, until real life happened. Anyway, judging by Nakatani's enthusiasm for how much they managed to squeeze into the usual 23-minute showtime, it should be a very interesting episode. That's it. It is unfortunate that the most notable part about this episode is the preview for next week, because this was mostly just an okay affair, especially compared to everyone else's spotlights. Don't get me wrong, I do think a story about Sango realizing that she didn't have to feel like the odd one out since they were all working towards the same goal is a great message. It's just that the scenario surrounding it was just not all that gripping, as it felt rather forced and failed to show, don't tell. I honestly wasn't expecting much from the script, as I knew who the writer was, but it is disappointing that such a good message wasn't told with a little more clarity and less balloons.
And what is with all the balloons?
This week's writer was Konomi Shugo, who at this point I think we could say is the weakest link in the writer's run for the show. Now, I don't think she's necessarily a bad writer, just very green and still needs a lot more experience. Her episodes overall are just fine, but also don't stand out much, ironic considering the spotlight character here. Sango's social anxieties really should have gotten more focus, as I really don't think there's something that can just be overcome with what's essentially a basic team building exercise. I really think there was just so much more they could have done with her here, like maybe have one of the clothing and or makeup coordinators be absent, forcing her to step in. We know she has an encyclopedic knowledge of fashion and makeup, so not only would she be able to show off her skills, but it could also make her feel more a part of the group as she witnessed everyone doing their best to make a successful show. But no, instead we got balloons, a really frivolous part of this event because they're cute. I mean, didn't that one nice clown make them popular? The whole scene itself just felt so rushed, and then the following scene of Numeri explaining why Sango couldn't go down the runway was just eye-rolling. Again, I think it could have worked if they portrayed Sango's lingering stage fright with just visual storytelling, but unfortunately, I don't think the writer was all that confident in her writing. So overall, while not a bad episode per se, as again, there was a good message, at least some development for Sango, this was also really clunkily told, and unfortunately, probably the worst of these spotlight episodes so far. Don't get me wrong, I still really like Sango, and really hope that she can get a better episode in the future, because this was just kind of deflating. As always, thank you for watching, and I do hope that the new anime season has been treating you all well. Personally, the shows I'm the most into right now are Komi-san, Miracle-chan, and Digimon Ghost Game. In the case of that last one, I'm just really hoping it's at least better than Adventure 2020, and so far, it's pretty solid. Still, what are you watching? Feel free to share in the comments below. And until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and
Hey, hey!
Oof, looks like someone else is unhappy with the severe lack of Sango episodes. Hey, don't shoot the messenger!